It's Christmas Eve. A desperate man, certain that his entire life has been worth nothing, stands on the brink of suicide. But heaven has better things in store for George Bailey.
If you're up there and you can hear me, show me the way.
From the depths of his despair, George will rise to the heights of joy and triumph. He learns that it really is a wonderful life. And this is the story of how one of the most beloved films in history came to be. Director Frank Capra once called It's a Wonderful Life the favorite of all of his great films. And it's one of my favorites, too. Hello, I'm Tom Bosley. It seems like everyone who's laughed and cried through this classic movie feels just about the same way. In fact, for most of us, watching It's a Wonderful Life has become as much a part of Christmas as trimming the tree and exchanging presents. The film is full of delightful images of an America gone by. It's a timeless story that continues to win the hearts of each new generation that discovers it. Surprisingly, It's a Wonderful Life began as a Christmas card. In 1943, writer Philip Van Doren Stern wrote a short story which he called The Greatest Gift. He had 200 copies printed up as Christmas cards and mailed them to his family and friends. 3 months later, RKO Radio Studios bought The Greatest Gift for $10,000, intending to make it a Christmas movie with Cary Grant. But while various writers were struggling to adapt The Greatest Gift for the screen, Cary Grant found his Christmas story elsewhere, filming The Bishop's Wife in 1947. Meanwhile, 3 different scripts were written for The Greatest Gift. The scripts were all interesting tries, but none of them made the grade. So The Greatest Gift gathered dust on the shelf at RKO. Until director Frank Capra came along. Capra read The Greatest Gift and saw its potential immediately. RKO, anxious to unload the troublesome project, sold The Greatest Gift to Capra for the same $10,000 they'd paid for it, and threw in all 3 scripts for free. Frank Capra was one of the most successful directors of the 1930s and had directed such classics as It Happened One Night, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and You Can't Take It With You. He was very popular with audiences, but critics often called his enjoyable, optimistic films Capricorn. Capra didn't mind, though. He felt that making positive statements through his movies was very important.
That's a great film. I love that film. It's my favorite film. And in a sense, it epitomizes everything I'd been trying to do and trying to say in the other films, only does it very dramatically with a very unique story. The importance of the individual is the theme that it tells, and that no man is a failure, and every man has something to do with his life. If he's born to do something.
I suppose it'd been better if I'd never been born at all.
What'd you say?
I said I wish I'd never been born.
Wait a minute, that's an idea. What do you think?
And this idea is carried out in this unique plot, because a man who thought he was a failure and thought everybody around him would have been better off had he not been born, was given the chance to see how the world around him would have been, his own small little world would have been, had he not been born.
Your brother, Harry Bailey, broke through the ice and was drowned at the age of 9.
That's a lie. Harry Bailey went to war. He got the Congressional Medal of Honor. He saved the lives of every man on that transport.
Every man on that transport died. Harry wasn't there to save them because you weren't there to save Harry. You see, George, you really had a wonderful life. Don't you see what a mistake it would be to throw it away?
Now that he had his story, Capra began to gather his actors. Although many of the film's roles would prove difficult to cast, Capra had always had only one George Bailey in mind, James Stewart. As a screen actor, they don't come much more likable than Jimmy Stewart. His characters on screen are honest, direct, and friendly. But Frank Capra saw a darker personality beneath Stewart's all-American charm. He knew that Stewart could not only handle the lighter moments in the film, but that he could also be convincing as a man sinking into bitterness and despair. Frank Capra was the first to see all the facets of this remarkable actor and to reveal them to the world. At about the same time that Stewart agreed to star in the film, Capra changed the title of the film to It's a Wonderful Life. Capra had a motto, one man, one film. It became known as the Capra Touch. He soon began to turn It's a Wonderful Life into a Frank Capra film. He took the best parts from the 3 scripts he had inherited from RKO and started adding ideas of his own. First, he created the Scrooge-like Mr. Potter character. Then he made sure that the town of Bedford Falls was believable, a real place.
And Capra took those 2 things, and a couple of more, that took those 2 things and started creating this story. And he hired Hackett and Goodrich, 2 of the finest writers that have ever been in motion pictures. It's wonderful. And in 2 weeks, they had they thought it was wonderful, these 2. And here, without it being an actual happening, without it being a play, a book, or anything, this from just these little lines, just little tiny thoughts, this is the way It's a Wonderful Life originated.
Capra populated Bedford Falls with the finest bunch of character actors in Hollywood. He had a kind of genius for casting. Just try to imagine It's a Wonderful Life with any other cast. It isn't easy, is it? The movie would have been very different if some of Capra's alternate choices had been hired. For instance, the role of George's Uncle Billy, played by Academy Award winner Thomas Mitchell. Capra considered actors like Barry Fitzgerald, Walter Brennan, Adolphe Menjou, and just think about this one, W.C. Fields. For the evil Mr. Potter, played to nasty perfection by Lionel Barrymore, he thought about Edgar Buchanan, Claude Rains, Charles Coburn, or that master of chills, Vincent Price. For Old Man Gower, the drunken druggist, Capra made an unorthodox choice. H.B. Warner, whose most famous role was that of Christ in Cecil B. DeMille's 1927 King of Kings. Typecast since then, H.B. Warner was delighted to get that part. He was quoted as saying, "I'm playing the damnedest, dirtiest bum you ever saw, a proper drunk, thanks to Capra, who used a little imagination." And Capra must have been determined to get Henry Travers into the film. He thought of the actor for several roles, including Uncle Billy, Mr. Gower, and George's father. But finally, Travers' angelic charm must have shown through, because Capra cast him as Heaven's messenger, Clarence.
Angel, second class.
Now, aside from the role of George Bailey, the film's most important part was that of George's wife, Mary. Frank Capra's first choice for Mary was one of his personal favorites, Jean Arthur. Capra, Arthur, and Stewart had all worked together twice already in You Can't Take It With You and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But Jean Arthur was already committed to a Broadway show, and so she turned Capra down. He then considered Olivia de Havilland and Anne Dvorak. Some people were even pushing for Ginger Rogers. But Capra finally decided on a fresh-faced MGM contract player, Donna Reed. Once again, Capra's instincts were accurate. Donna Reed was the ideal Mary Bailey, the perfect mixture of wholesome sex appeal and homegrown American strength and virtue. Here's an interesting bit of Wonderful Life trivia. Frank Capra had hired someone to toss the rock for Donna Reed in this scene. But as it turned out, she was a terrific baseball pitcher. Donna surprised Capra and the crew with the power and accuracy of her toss, throwing the rocks better than anyone else on the set.
Hey, that's pretty good.
So when Donna Reed joined the cast, the final ingredient had been added.
Welcome home, Mr. Bailey.
Her sweetness and beauty make it obvious to us, if not at first to George, that staying in Bedford Falls is not a punishment, but a pleasure. If George had had a wonderful life, to a great extent it's his wife Mary who has made it so. So it looked as if Capra had a complete cast. But there's one other actor that bears mentioning, although there was no role written into the script for one of Capra's favorite performers. The director created one. That's right, Jimmy the Raven, who plays Uncle Billy's pet. The Raven made his film debut in Capra's You Can't Take It With You, and subsequently appeared in every Frank Capra feature. It just goes to show that things haven't changed much in Hollywood. It's all in who you know.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bailey.
Hello, Violet. Hey, you look good. That's some dress you got on there.
What? This old thing? Well, I only wear it when I don't care how I look.
How would you like to...
Yes.
These days, movies can say or show just about anything imaginable. But in 1946, the production code of the Motion Picture Association of America was pretty stern about what audiences could see and hear. And they had a list of things for Capra to change. Certain phrases had to go, like nuts to you, and such words as impotent, dang, lousy, and jerk. Thus, the terrible J word was never uttered. However, in one case, Capra did manage to sidestep the production code. It stipulated that criminals had to be punished for their crimes. Well, the horrible Mr. Potter, who drives George to desperation by stealing the building and loans $8,000, never receives his comeuppance. Capra said later that he received more mail about this point over the years than about anything else in the film.
Nothing wrong with the books. I've just misplaced $8,000. I can't find it anywhere.
You misplaced $8,000.
Yes, sir.
Look at you. Miserable little clerk crawling in here on your hands and knees and begging for help. No securities, no stocks, no bonds, nothing but a miserable little $500 equity in a life insurance policy. You're worth more dead than alive. I'm going to swear out a warrant for your arrest. Misappropriation of funds, manipulation, malfeasance. All right, George. Go ahead. Go. You can't hide in a little town like this.
Well, that little town is Bedford Falls, the pretty little place where George Bailey lives his wonderful life. It becomes so familiar to us over the course of the film that it begins to seem like a real place. Bedford Falls was, in fact, a set built on the RKO Ranch in Encino, California. It was one of the longest sets ever constructed for an American movie. The main street was 300 yards long, 3 city blocks with a tree-lined center parkway, 75 stores and buildings, a bank with a marble front, a post office, and a library. The set was built in 3 separate sections, and when it was put together, it covered 4 acres. 20 full-grown oaks were transplanted on the set. Frank Capra claimed that he loved weather, especially movie weather. When he directed Lost Horizon in 1936, he actually had sets built inside a large ice house so that the actor's breath would show. Obviously, the Bedford Falls set was too large to refrigerate, so for the wintry scenes, something else had to be done. Movie snow at that time was usually made of cornflakes, painted white. The falling flakes looked like snow, but the loud crunch made it impossible to record dialogue. Capra wanted something better, quieter. The special effects crew came to the rescue. They covered Bedford Falls in a blanket of snow, using 3,000 tons of shaved ice, 300 tons of gypsum, 300 tons of plaster, and 6,000 gallons of a special mixture of foamite, soap, and water. In fact, the crew later won an Academy Award for these new developments in snowmaking. Oh, by the way, when you watch these freezing scenes, remember that they were all shot during a record-breaking heat wave in the summer of 1946. At one point during the filming, the heat became so oppressive that Capra gave everyone a day off just to recuperate. One of the funniest scenes in the movie takes place in a high school gymnasium. A Charleston contest is suddenly interrupted when the floor of the gym slides open to reveal a swimming pool beneath it. Now, many critics jeered at this scene, calling it movie fakery at its worst. But it's real, and it really does exist. In fact, it's in daily use at Beverly Hills High School, where the scene was filmed. Movie fakery, huh? Oh, by the way, do you recognize the prankster who opens the gym floor because he's jealous of George Bailey? Well, he should look familiar. He's Carl Alfalfa Schweitzer, one of the popular members of our gang. Frank Capra loved to take advantage of surprises on the set. Here are a couple of my favorite surprises that Capra left in the final cut. Thomas Mitchell as Uncle Billy has had a little too much to drink. When the scene was filmed, Mitchell was supposed to exit, but just at that moment, a technician off-screen accidentally knocked over a stack of props. It sounded like Uncle Billy had crashed into a whole line of garbage cans. The poor guy expected to be fired, but Capra gave him a $10 bonus for improving sound and characterization. The sound you hear is opportunity crashing for one lucky technician.
I'm all right, I'm all right. Oh, sweetest flower.
In this scene, there's been a run on the Bailey Savings and Loan.
How much do you need?
George has to use the $2,000 he got for his honeymoon to tide over his nervous customers.
All right, Tom, how much do you need?
$242.
No, Tom.
Everything here was scripted, except the final request from Mrs. Davis, played by Ellen Corby. Capra told her to surprise Stewart.
Could I have $17.50?
And that's Jimmy Stewart's surprised reaction as well. In another sequence, Capra faced an unexpected snag when Jimmy Stewart became extremely reluctant to kiss Donna Reed in the now famous telephone scene. He kept asking Capra to delay this scene and shoot others instead. Stewart complained that he'd been away from the cameras too long for such a hot and heavy scene. A fella gets rusty, he said. Well, finally, Capra insisted on shooting the scene, but just to make sure Stewart didn't back out, he restaged it so that Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed had to share the phone. Stewart and Reed shot the scene as directed in one take, and as you can see, Jimmy didn't back out.
Will you tell that guy I'm giving him the chance of a lifetime? Do you hear? The chance of a lifetime.
He says it's the chance of a lifetime.
Now, you listen to me. I don't want any plastics, and I don't want any ground floors, and I don't want to get married ever to anyone. You understand that? I want to do what I want to do. And you're...
George.
Wow. When the take was finished, Capra was satisfied. But the script girl had a problem. She said, yeah, it was fine, all right, except they'd left out a whole page of dialogue. And Capra replied, with technique like that, who needs dialogue? Print it.
Hey, look, mister. We serve hard drinks in here for men who want to get drunk fast, and we don't need any characters around to give the joint atmosphere. Is that clear? It'll have to slip you my lip for a convincer.
Sheldon Leonard, one of the movie's most memorable bad guys, has his own memories of It's a Wonderful Life.
Capra was the master of the use of sentiment. And since I was a little corny myself and believed that that was, like garlic, one of the great ingredients for flavoring a story, if not overused like garlic, I respected him as the master.
Would you show these gentlemen to the door? Sure. This way, gentlemen.
This was Jimmy Stewart's first picture after the Army, and it was a test for him. He, I think, felt a little insecure about his technique at that time because it had been years since he had stood in front of a camera. And it was interesting to watch him regain his confidence and take control.
This is one of the wonderful things about the picture, I think. The scene at the end of the picture, this is after it's a different place and nobody knows me and everything, right? But I stop for a minute and I say, God, I'm not a praying man, but please bring me back. Please bring me back. I want to live again.
I want to live again. Please, God, let me live again.
The film premiered at New York's Globe Theater on December 20th, 1946. It's hard to believe, but the film was not really the hit that Capra and RKO thought it would be. It's a Wonderful Life was nominated for several Academy Awards, but didn't win any. Within a few months, It's a Wonderful Life was old news. Capra, Stewart, and everyone else involved moved on to other projects, and the film would retire into obscurity, waiting to be rediscovered by future generations. It's a Wonderful Life would eventually be saved by those who recognized its true worth.
To my big brother, George, the richest man in town.
Like George Bailey, we might wonder what the world would have been like without It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life is indeed a wonderful film. Capricorn? Absolutely. And what, I ask you, could be better than that?